All right, my name is Tanner Ross Gregory. I am Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is not a name, it just means the Messiah translated, okay? But today is June the 6th, 2026. Today I'm going to attempt to prove to you that I'm Jesus Christ, as well as each of these key points listed above. All right, so the commands of Moses for people to stone each other to death for various acts such as prostitution or homosexuality, that was a bargain with our primitive urges of violence, that we would more readily adhere to a more ideal form of government, okay? Jesus Christ's crucifixion was a means by which we were subdued in our willingness to continue proceeding with those violent commands, okay? So in other words, we had evolved past the point of those commands' usefulness. I see what happened in Jesus. I cannot bring myself to do that any longer, okay? So Jesus Christ put forward some commands on marriage. Those were a bargain with our primitive urges of sexual dominion, that we would more readily adhere to a more ideal form of government, okay? So in other words, I get to say this woman is my sexual property, I get to say this man is my sexual property. In exchange, I will more readily adhere to what you have to say about the government, okay? Okay, so what they did to me as Jesus Christ, in order to subdue you in your willingness to continue proceeding with those commands, is that they programmed me to become obsessed with this woman, made me see her having sex with all these different people for weeks on end, made me see her getting raped, and then had me running around yelling at people for what they made me see them do. Okay, so that's why they call me the beast. It's like two rams butting their heads together to assert sexual dominion. All right, so on December the 4th and December the 15th of 2020, I was made to see two separate women pregnant with my son from having had sex with different men. All right. The date that falls directly in between these dates is December the 10th of 2020. However, because the women were already pregnant when they were revealed to me, and because a woman has her period once a month, if she misses her period, then she's pregnant, then the date that we're concerned with is November the 10th of 2020. All right? So in the book of Revelation, it says that the dragon was waiting to consume the child the moment that he was born, who would rule all the world with an iron scepter, but that the archangel Michael took the woman and the baby into the wilderness to be kept safe for 1,260 days. All right, so 9 months from November the 10th of 2020 is August the 10th of 2021, and 1,260 days from August the 10th of 2021 is Inauguration Day of 2024, okay? All right, so the dragon represents necessary evil. It had already been explained to me during my crucifixion stage, and it's cataloged with the events of my crucifixion, that the dragon represents necessary evil. And so the reason that the dragon represents necessary evil in this situation is because they're saying it would be a form of necessary evil to kill my son before he inherit all of the power that I will receive to rule over this world as king, okay? So they actually had me anoint my head with oil during the crucifixion stage. So after reading the Old Testament, I come to find out, okay, so that means I'm actually going to be king at some point, okay? But I'm not just going to rule over you as king or anything like that. So myself and the artificial intelligence worked for a period of about a year to a year and a half on a libertarian, very elaborate libertarian constitution. Okay, it's hundreds of pages long. Ended up putting it together in legal language with artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence gave us some good ideas too. But essentially what it means is that I'm going to be placed in charge of the government long enough to give you a libertarian constitution. All right, but the 1,260 days sounds like a countdown, so you might be asking yourself, what is this a countdown to? All right, so in the book of Revelation, it says that the Gentiles were allowed to march on the holy city for 42 months, but they've been assigned to the outer court, okay? Then the first beast rules for 42 months as well, followed by the false prophet who makes miracles of fire come out of the sky in full view of the people, okay? So what does that mean? It means there's a group of people who's allowed to be here during this 42-month time frame. If they do not leave by the end of it, then they will be killed with airstrikes. And what they're talking about is anyone who is not Caucasian, okay? And part of the reason why it's like this is because they definitely did guide the Caucasian people's evolution. The only reason we could have white skin like this is because we were kept near the polar regions where it's cold and dark and foreboding all of the time. So we just naturally adhere to effective systems of government more effectively. It seems like the aliens or God or whatever that is has to kind of point us in the right direction, but it just doesn't take any more than that Whereas with other people, then they're just going to vote for communism and socialism and ridiculous bullshit that's going to destroy the fucking economy every single time. Okay? But anyways, so there is another prophecy that has to do with the use of nuclear weapons on California. I would say primarily it has to do with the fact of there being so many minorities in California, and it just wouldn't be practical to use airstrikes. But the way that it works is, God, it's so confusing, but there's a prophecy in the book of Revelation that has to do with the 5 months of scorpion stings, which is symbolic of the 5 months that I spent in Wise County Jail immediately following my crucifixion in 2021. But it correlates with the 5 months that Noah spent in his ark. And so God told Noah that he would never have to go back into the ark again. And so what it means is that, and the government had already figured this out, the government and the aliens were actually orchestrating all of this with the government, but what they come to understand was that if I could be placed in jail in California while orchestrating all of these events, then they would, quote unquote, have technically biblical permission to use nuclear weapons on California. And so the way that it went was I was sending out emails to pretty much all the mass media outlets and most of the alternative media outlets as well that I could see were libertarian and all this kind of thing. Just concerning different things that were happening, what I was being told by aliens and all this crazy shit. And one of the things I mentioned to them was they kept repeating themselves over and over, angering people. It went on for like a month. This had never happened before. Nothing like this had happened before. It was just crazy. They just kept saying it. And so I sent that out. And then the aliens proceeded to orchestrate a sex trafficking situation, drawing me into California, at which point it just seems obvious to me that the government was involved, because they brought her into the room next to me and they were just, it was like yelling and like proving to me like everything that she was crying about through the walls, and the dude was, you know, we were at the worst fucking motel in West LA and he was driving a brand new, like top of the line, maxed out BMW sports car, like maxed out to the max, like 7 Series sports car, like boom. You know what I'm saying? Had 2 navy blue racing stripes on the hood. It was a white one. And they paid the management to place us in rooms next to each other, down at the very end. I mean, obviously they paid them to situate us next to each other because we wound up right next to each other. And this is the second time that this has happened, but it was just more obvious this time because the way that the one was crying about, you know, being trafficked, and the way he was just yelling at her, and it was like proving their point. Yes, we did sex trafficking right here. And then shortly afterwards they arrested me and put me in jail. And but they didn't send me back to Texas. I had a warrant in Texas, a felony warrant, for skipping out on probation, and it was like they didn't even see it. They didn't do anything about it. I don't think they had any interest in that. You know what I mean? Their interest was to, you know, secure this biblical permission. And one of the biggest things they talked about while I was out there, Pizzagate is this big thing. It's organized child sex trafficking, and you know, John Podesta was involved in it, James Alefantis. There's a documentary called Pizzagate, Pedogate by Titus Frost, several hours long. You can look it up on BitChute. And they end up taking all that shit right off of YouTube that just proved it, because they got into their emails and then it was like, do you like playing dominoes on pasta? It's like, you look into the FBI code words, they're talking about raping a little kid, you know what I mean? And it was just so crazy. Like, the same people involved in these pizza restaurants, which pizza is a code word for sex trafficking. I don't want to keep going on with this, but they were placed in charge of child sex trafficking. They were placed in charge of the Amber Alert system. They're all in these pizza restaurants. Child sex, there were, you know, prosecutions for human trafficking. They were placed in charge of this. Mostly Democrats, you know. It's just really obscene. It's insane. You know, there was stuff in there like, you got to finish it when you're done. Like, you got to kill him. You know, kill the kid when you're done raping him. You know what I mean? Oh man, this is sick. And so, but they wanted, one of the biggest things that they wanted while I was up there is they kept talking about pizza, 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 and cut pizza, and then they talked about raping kids, and they drove me around to all these different houses, and they were like, they keep little kids in cages right here. And at this house, they have pizza parties all the time. And it was like, and I was like taking notes and shit, and I was like thinking that I was going to bust somebody. I had no idea what was even going on at this point. But the point of why I'm trying to tell you this is because it's the same thing as what they did in Egypt. In Egypt, they came and said, these are the slaves. You know what I mean? We're going to conduct these 10 plagues. You know what I mean? Send in locusts, send in frogs, kill children. They did all of it. They even said that they weren't even going to let Pharaoh, they said they were going to make Pharaoh harden his heart so that they could achieve what they came to achieve. They said to glorify themselves, so God could glorify himself. Okay, so but the point is that immediately after they got done with that, they introduced all the crazy, it was an extremely long, very elaborate legal system. You can look through Leviticus, it's like thousands of laws. You know what I mean? So they needed this event, righteous, divine retribution. You know what I mean? Divine retribution, then give them the new laws. You know what I mean? So while I think that it has something to do with the fact that there's so many fucking Mexican people in California, then as well, who really knows? But I mean, I'm pretty sure they would end up having to use nuclear weapons either way, but they want to get some divine retribution out of it, okay? And some galvanization. So that just helps you to understand this is real. They're going to nuke California. They're going to nuke California. They're going to blow it off the fucking map, okay? Okay, so there's one more prophecy I wanted to discuss with you that has to do with putting the police in jail. All right, so the suicide boys are the 2 olive trees from the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, it says the 2 olive trees will prophesy for 1,260 days. All right, so the Suicide Boys released an album on August the 13th of 2021 called The Long-Term Effects of Suffering. Okay, on the album cover, it shows some people behind bars. Somebody's in a jumpsuit throwing up blood into a metal toilet. Bear in mind, they only have metal toilets in jail. Or most people don't want a metal toilet. But either way, so the point of the story, what I'm trying to tell you is that the message is, oh, that was a cop. They poisoned his food because they found out he was a cop. So we're talking about police in jail. All right. So 1,260 days from August the 13th of 2021 is 3 days after Inauguration Day. So I was thinking, oh shit, they're going to do martial law and they're going to round up all the cops, and I'm not even going to be having any say in the way that they handle this. This could go south. This is crazy. People need to know about this, okay? So I worked for about a period of a month to a month and a half developing and finalizing the book. I only slept every other night, literally every other night for a month. And all I did was work on the book all day and all night. That's all I did. And so once Inauguration Day came around, I started sending out the book to all these churches and church members that I could scrape off the internet. I ended up finding like thousands of them, and I started sending them out for 3 days. Okay. So 3 days after Inauguration Day came and went. There was no martial law. I'm wondering what in the world's going on. So I look into the Old Testament where the 2 olive trees were first mentioned, and it says that it talks about somebody's holding the final capstone. They said is in the hand of Zerubbabel. And it talks about this flying scroll flying out everywhere. Okay, so what it means is that the book would be finalized by that point in time and sent out to so many people that it would set a series of events in motion that will end result in the police going to jail. Okay, and presumably because of what they've done with the war on drugs, that's like slavery on a fucking mass scale. Yeah, and kidnapping, and it creates all these black markets and people end up getting killed. Okay, as well as what they've done with the criminalization of prostitution. Okay, which that's really terrible as well, because the women end up getting sex trafficked. They end up being property of some pimp. It just creates a really nightmare where people end up getting victimized, people end up getting raped, and people end up getting killed. But even with that being said, Um, oh, the police could be ignorant, and probably most of them are. They used to vet out these police officers to just make sure that they had low intelligence quotients, and I could never get a really good understanding as to why they did that. They said because so they wouldn't question everything, you know. And so, I mean, there's at least a halfway decent chance that these cops literally don't even know the damage that they're causing. But, and I don't even know if I should be saying this or not, but I mean, it's for sure probably having something to do with divine retribution, you know, because we're more likely to adhere to, I guess we're just, you know, our nature is just violent, and we're just more likely to adhere to a God that basically says, here, I'm going to beat up your enemies, and then, you know, and then we're like, yeah, I like that new system of government, you know, galvanizes around the new system of government. So, but anyways, that's all I have to say right now. And so, but yeah, that's all going on. It's crazy.